Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Surprise, it's not Suzanne Chisty. My name's Glenn Burgess. I'm CMO and head of partnerships at Fintech Circle. And we've got a very, very special webinar today for you. We've got Kimberley Waldron and Angela Yore of SkyParlour. Which is a very specialist PR agency for fintechs. So we've been organizing this for a while. Unfortunately, just due to a family emergency, Angela can't be here, but that's okay because it means we have twice as much Kimberley. So Kimberley's going to be taking us through how you use PR to secure funding, how to make a big splash in the marketplace, through Series A, Series B, all sorts of stages. So without further ado, you don't want to hear me. Let's bring on Kimberley. And there she is, Kimberley. Hi. From SkyParlour. Now, you've been around, how many years have you been trading now? 13 years?
Yeah, unlucky for some, but yeah, 13 years we've been Fintech PRing. So yeah. Getting on to 15 years, so we've been through many guises of fintech and its many evolutions in the last little while.
I bet you have. I first saw you actually at Fintech Week London last year. Mm-hmm. Both you and Angela were moderating panels, weren't you? So I was very impressed. Yeah. So thank you for doing the webinar with us today. So without further ado, shall we learn how to talk the walk with PR?
Yeah.
And I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Glenn, and thanks for having us. Thanks to Fintech Circle for having us on as well, and for everybody that's sort of who's joining today. I did notice, I think we've got quite a small and focused group on. So whoever, and if anybody's joining and you can see the chat function, feel free to drop questions as we go, or to even just drop your name and your business so that we can make this really interactive. As Glenn said, unfortunately, my business partner wasn't able to make it today, which means you get one for the price of two, unfortunately. Luckily, I am in PR, so I can fit a lot of words into a short space of time, which I'm going to try to do. But as I said, please do feel free to make it interactive. We've got some polls as we go through, which Glenn has prepared, so please take part in those. As we are a smaller focus group, I do think it would be great to make sure that we're on track with what we're talking about and that it's relevant. So, you know, do feel free to drop questions, comments into the chat as we go. So I wanted to start by sort of talking a little bit about context for us as a business and what we've seen, where we started very quickly, because we're not here to talk about us, but it is useful context. So for anybody who's undertaking a PR program or who's thinking about that. So we've been in around Fintech PR, what we called Fintech PR, back in 2009. And at that stage, when we entered the market, nobody was really using the word fintech. It was sort of more around payments and payments related products. And any fintech, any financial PR that was taking place was either really sort of focused on reporting, formal reports, annual results, sort of for public companies, or it was out and out investor relations, and anything outside of that financial PR, traditional financial PR bubble, was sort of based on trade PR, you know, B2B messaging, very straight down the line trade and B2B angles. Since then, I would say that we've seen the actual brand of fintech itself shaped by the innovation that's taking place around us all. And anybody that's in fintech knows that when you're in fintech, you are in fintech. You know, it is almost a club. It's still one of the world's most upwardly mobile global sectors, and it's very exciting. But it's moved on a lot in recent years, and that's impacted how we do our marketing. So when we first, as I said, when we first started, we were very sort of the old school product, price, place, promotion sort of marketing. It was all about a lot of the press releases were written in the same way. It was about communicating all about the benefits of the tech, and even the spokespeople were more positioned as business spokespeople. And of course, the way that the industry has now been shaped by innovation, it's been shaped by and accelerated by economic events and the digitization of most of our lives. And one of the biggest influences on fintech at the moment, as we all know, is the investment community, and not just the fact that the businesses within fintech want to attract investment, most businesses, but that the fintech community is watching everything fintech does very, very closely, and is wanting a return on that. So it's that expectation that the investment community has on the fintech industry now, and that's changing the way in which we communicate. So now, we are talking about, we're moving away from that traditional messaging, and we're talking about the value fintech's adding to the wider world, alignment to investment for impact and broader ESG agendas. We're turning founders and spokespeople into influencers and commentators. And even now for pure play B2B businesses in fintech, we're seeing that B2B2C message is even more important than ever. All this helps appeal to the investment community at every level of investment. And I think maybe 18 months ago, even 2 years, so very, very recently, there was a mantra emerging that, you need to choose between, as a fintech, you need to choose between who you're communicating with. So are you talking to your investment community, or are you talking to your customers or your potential customer base? And there was this idea that you needed to choose. But I think the way that comms has developed, and I think the way that the VC or the even angel investment has become so important to fintech, that there's a general growing understanding that those two things are linked, and ultimately investors now want to see more sustainable growth. They want to see long-term return, or short-term in some cases, and that links directly to users volume. Especially in fintech, we all know that the volume is important when it comes to transaction and being profitable. So we've seen that sort of merge, and I think that as a business ourselves, yes, we're not a fintech, but we are very, very focused on the fintech industry. We've seen a change in the way in which businesses are spending when it comes to PR, and we've seen as more investment floods into fintech, more is being spent on things like PR and marketing. So what I would say from the offset for sort of any business who's thinking about spending PR, who's planning on spending PR is that good PR isn't cheap, and it's something that needs to be considered from day one if you're going to do it right. That's not to say you can't make a positive impact through smaller budgets, because you absolutely can. It's just a little bit more about focusing and planning ahead. So final thing really on us as a business before I talk about what we think good PR looks like for investment, and some tips and hints on what to be considering. 2 years ago, we split after 10 years in the space, we split our business into 3 divisions. So started, Scale and Consult, which each was designed to help businesses at various stages and various life events, specifically focused on stages of growth, including funding. And it was the best thing we ever did. So I can confidently say that over the last 10 years, we've helped tens of fintechs through their growth, and helped enable close to $1 billion worth of funding into our client base, just in the last couple of years. So we know that it's not only about PR, but that PR is one of the biggest and most influential mouthpieces when it comes to investment. We also know that VCs now, especially perhaps Series A and above, are using digital tools to scour the internet, to create lists of the data-driven lists of the most emerging fintechs in the market, and they're creating hit lists of who they want to speak to based on that. So your digital footprint, your PR, your digital marketing is becoming increasingly important. And I'm being told I need to start my slides, which is quite true. That was my intro. So that's us. That's the context of where we are. Our business has changed due to the influx of investment into the fintech space, and hopefully now I'm going to share some of that insight with everybody that's tuned in. So moving on. So when to think about PR then? So we work with all different kinds of founders and leaders in fintech. Some are serial entrepreneurs. Some are entrepreneurs turned founders that come from, existing financial businesses or traditional banks. We do work, some are what I would call pure geniuses, straight out of university and straight into entrepreneurship. And some are accidental entrepreneurs. Some are skilled technologists or financiers that stumble or create or come across a solution that they feel will make a difference in the world and get to market. The one thing that all of these people sort of have in common is that they're all going to be instrumental when it comes to the way in which their business communicates. And each of these different personality types tend to have a different approach or value that they want to extract from PR. But the answer to the question of when to start PR, for me, the answer is the same to everyone. It's now, or even yesterday. The analogy that when you're ready when you feel thirsty, it's already too late. Your body's already in a deficit. It's too late once you already feel thirsty. And I would say that's the same for PR. So once you start to really feel the need and you start thinking, oh, a potential competitor's there, or we hear a lot of businesses saying, oh, there was somebody I used to work with, they started a business, they're on the news, they're talking about this issue, or they're at part of that event. What isn't normally, seen is that those businesses have probably been building their profile, building relationships with the media, refining their messaging for a good few months before they suddenly appear in all the places that you want to be in. So I think every business, from the day that they know they're having a business, they need to start thinking about their own PR, and that's from everything from social channels to themselves, how they communicate about their business to others, even on a very, very small scale. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the stages of investment and where PR can support. And then I'm going to move into a case study of something that I think is a great example of using PR at different stages. And then there is a section where I want to talk about when you've actually got investment and the value that can bring. We will be doing, there's quite a lot of detail in the second part. So we have created a follow-up document and a handout that Fintech Circle will be distributing tomorrow. So I'll talk through it. I'll do my best to keep it simple without going into full campaign planning. But I think we just wanted to do a quick poll on this section. So just interested to know, of the people that are joining us, what stage you're at, if you wouldn't mind answering.
Yeah, so it's just what stage of fundraising are you at? If you are fundraising, either seed, Series A, Series B, or later stage, it'd be nice to know.
Yeah, because it helps me just to be able to sort of focus in on sort of the elements that are most important. So I see that we've got quite a few early stage. Everybody that's joined seems to be either not looking for funding right now or sort of at early stage. So as we said, as I mentioned, for me, the advice would be the time is now. So to get investment, as we all know, I'm not an investment expert, but I am confident that I'm an expert in how PR can help you get investment. So just the caveat is I'm not an advisor on going for investment outside of the realms of PR. But so to get investment, we all know a business needs to have some form of inherent or perceived value. Those valuations are based on many factors. Where PR can help promote them and where we should be thinking about those things is the management team, proven track record, potential market size, and then obviously risk is always a factor for any investor. So we need to think about elements we can bring into the comms that help mitigate that risk, to talk around it, or to squash that perceived risk. So PR can help amplify important information around each of these points as you start on your investment journey. And we work with, I would say that the businesses that we tend to work with have really just gone through seed, but I do quite a lot of sort of informal and friendly advice to businesses that are also at pre-seed and want to be aware of the things they should be thinking about. So factors that are likely to impact the type of investors and the type of investor you want to get involved. It's going to be something you need to be thinking about throughout your PR. So something else to think about at this point is how competitive the media landscape is when it comes to communicating. So tech PR has emerged again in the last 10 years as one of the fastest areas of PR, and the reason for that is it's linked very closely to the rapid pace technology itself evolves, and of course fintech as part of that is an incredibly fast-paced and competitive industry. So we've always, especially relevant to the fintech circle audiences, there are always new startups, new funding rounds and new innovations that make the media landscape a very, very busy place. The media, the journalists, the people, the influencers, the communities, the groups that are around to help support fintech startups, they're people too, and they are inundated. So anybody about to embark on PR, needs to be aware that to remain relevant, to get good results, they have to have news. They have to have either they actually have to have news, or they have to have the willingness and the time and the input to dedicate to their agency to help create that news. The other thing is that because of this pace, many businesses we're seeing are being pushed through their life cycle at really, really high speed. So we're seeing a lot of businesses move from seed through to Series B at an unprecedented rate. And the way in which we all know, or could probably give examples of this happening, the way that we all learn about the changing landscape is through PR. So more than, I would say, recent stats which sort of show that more than 60% of news, even in trade PR, is driven by PR agencies, and by proxy that means they're driven by the likes of the businesses that are tuning in today. So we're dictating what that landscape looks like. So any PR requires input and drive from the senior team, especially for startups. PR has never been and never will be a plug and play service. It doesn't work unless it's got the investment and commitment of either the appointed senior marketing team. Very commonly at seed and Series A, it's the founders. And I've learned since we launched our started division, which runs through to sort of Series B 2 years ago, the sort of the closeness that I've had with the founders that we work with, and the way in which we work together is very, it is different, and we need that. The businesses that perform the best and get the return on investment are the senior teams that are the most open to making that happen. It's also quite interesting, just as a side note, that working, and especially startups, and the use of tech really helps with the PR agency and business relations. So all of our clients, all of our startup clients, we're all on Slack, we're all using Asana, we're all in a very efficient way of communicating and working, whereas some of our more scale-up clients, some of our businesses that are either going through M&A activity or they're even looking to IPO, we still tend to communicate in quite a traditional way, even though I would say that's also evolving. So it's worth thinking about, when you do engage a PR agency, how does that extra line of communication, this extra team that you're in effect bringing into your small business, how do they integrate into your comms channels? Mostly it's, as I said, through tools like Asana and Slack and work tracking. So ways that you can streamline your time and efficiency to be able to give that PR agency what it needs to be effective is also something to really think about. So what to promote at various stages of investment? Well, might sound like we're sort of stating the obvious, but PR it can really, really help secure funding. It can attract the best talent, can grow customer and user base, and it can really help open up and scale your business into new markets. It does this by boosting your professional standing, increasing your brand recognition, importantly, improving brand reputation and credibility. It opens up your brand, it exposes your brand to a much broader pool of investors. There is still a very strong case, especially me being from the north, the grim north, and the financial services sector still being predominantly London-based. There's still that perception that with funding, especially sort of pre-Series A, that it is who you know, not what you know. But thankfully, technology is helping that change, and the use of digital comms channels and the way in which investors do data-driven research into media coverage and appearances that is starting to change, and especially because we're seeing a lot of investment into fintech from outside of the UK, especially from the US. So that's something that's really important to consider. It builds excitement, and you do want that. We want people to feel excited about what you're bringing to market, because we want to attract talent as much as we want to attract investment, because that's going to be an important part of your investor story a little later in the day. So and then finally, it grows market share and share of voice. Not necessarily the same thing or mutually exclusive, but obviously linked. So when we start to work with a business, I always say, you don't need to worry if you're right now, if you're early stage, if your market share is less than 1% or, very small, because we can make sure that your share of voice is bigger, and that'll lead to helping you grow your market share. So two slightly different things. We want to grow share of voice, and that'll lead to hopefully helping grow market share. So in terms of what's important at different stages of investment, I mean, today I'm specifically sort of focusing on pre-series B, but to think about pre-seed, just to start at the very beginning, most businesses, as you guys listening will probably know as well, or if not better than me, most businesses at pre-seed, they're sort of getting off the ground. Investment, they could possibly be self-funded until this point, and investment might come from friends and family or a close professional network. And at this stage, it's a lot of businesses are starting to think about PR, but it really can still have a very strong impact. It introduces the founder, it can showcase your idea and ambition and define a really viable business model. In terms of media reach at this point, I think you can keep things to your own channels, but at minimum, you should be thinking about your newsroom on your website, your LinkedIn page. Even if you are still building your MVP or still just starting to explore and develop the idea, it can't harm to start to get on the map what the vision is. So that's sort of at pre-seed. You still need to start to build your PR vision. Sort of seed round, just bringing in some angels. At this point, we need to be thinking about building credibility into the team, because everybody knows at this stage with at seed and pre-series A, it's still the founding team that are going to be attracting the most attention or the most confidence from investors. Probably ready to launch an MVP or have conducted addressable market research and have customers and users starting to sign up. I know every business is different, so I'm talking quite general from a comms perspective. But when you are wanting to secure seed, and as you go through sort of that seed round, we need to start promoting and proving the credibility of the founding team. Need to really start to define the market need, and if possible, if case studies are not possible from actual customers at this point, then we need to start thinking about use cases at least, and starting to really show the proven track record of the founding team. So at seed, it's credibility of the need for the service, defining the market, and bringing in use cases, and really promoting the founding team who's going to deliver a return on that investment. Then I think moving to Series A, when that's sort of expanding into VCs, more serious VCs, sort of away from just the seed round. We know that now, especially in fintech, that seeds sort of Series A can be anything from 2 million to 15 million. Roughly, and I think in 2021 the median sort of Series A round was around 10 million. So to be attracting that kind of funding from the right type of investor, because that's also important. You want to be communicating the culture and the way in which you want to decide if you want to be one of those businesses that's appealing purely on return. We're going to be the next unicorn, we're going to be the next decacorn. If you want to go down that route, or if you want to be talking about longevity, sustainability, tech for good, obviously they're going to attract sort of different types of VCs culturally, depending on the tone you take with your press. But Series A, it's really important to start thinking about that track record, customer case studies. Is your product relevant across different markets? Are you starting to monetize? What's the ARR? Do you need investment? Could you stand alone? How can we communicate those things? And then when it comes to Series B, you need to, you know, still, it depends on where you sit, but Series B is moving into that sort of later stage where, you know, the business is established, the team is larger, the team is moving away from the founders. So the founders, you know, perhaps we stop commenting on business wins and we stop commenting on just on what's taking place in the market, and they elevate to subjects that have high relevancy to the value proposition, but are not directly linked. We showcase expertise in the larger team. We start to talk about a little bit about profitability and momentum. And perhaps start to be able to do case studies with bigger name customers. So that's sort of very, very loosely, you know, from seed to Series B, how the PR evolves from focusing in on the founding team and the credibility of that team, starting to talk about the product, starting, if possible, things that really appeal to investors like product-led growth, focusing in on buzzwords, and bringing in customers and big names. And something that, especially around Series A and Series B, that we know VCs find important is that businesses are investing early on in attracting the best talent. We all know there's a shortage of talent, and securing the best talent is hard. So it's showing that there's also a focus throughout your comms in focusing on that. So how do we do that? How does PR help? How does PR help to do these things? So that we break it down into four main areas that help us demonstrate things we know appeal to investors. So that's product-led growth, credible leadership, and customer confidence. And a caveat, I guess the fourth one is attracting the best of the best in the industry. So what all of our comms strategies, we advise to do one of four things, hopefully all four things simultaneously. One is to tell a personal story. What is the entrepreneurial journey of the team? And why is this team credible and trustworthy? And why will they make money for any given investor? Why will they help realize this vision and get this business to market and get it profitable? Then we want to talk about business momentum. So momentum and progress in the business. We want to demonstrate the possibility of longevity in the business. And right now, again, things have shifted, but it's important to decide what sort of business or brand you want to be. Are we talking about the sustainability? Are we talking about ESG? Are we talking about things that are very important? I mean, the financial services industry at the moment is at a unique point in time, post-pandemic, and given what's happening culturally in the world at the moment, where it's almost more essential than ever that we take on that role of making good decisions that help society navigate through, you know, difficult waters, whether that's issues of financial inclusion, cybersecurity and privacy. We need to be thinking about how we communicate that through PR and what role each fintech has to play in that. It's not possible to ignore it. So we need to be thinking about community growth stories, helpful partnerships, impact on things like financial inclusion and diversity. So business momentum, but we don't ever want to just be saying we're great, we won this customer. We need to be thinking about the why that matters more now than ever, as we're seeing more VCs invest for impact. Influence and leadership, as I mentioned at the beginning, it depends on the leader, but within every business, if that isn't naturally the founder or the CEO, most business, there's usually a natural spokesperson that will emerge as an influencer. And I think it's about being open-minded about who that is as well, as long as that person's sticking around and it is tied in. But it's not enough for a leadership team now just to be rolled out for generic quotes that say we're delighted in this partnership, or we won this, or aren't we great, we're pleased to have done this. We want to ban words like we're delighted, we're pleased, isn't this, aren't we great? And it is about influence and leadership that demonstrate what your service does, why it's important to the world, and the problems it will solve. So sometimes it's about taking part in things that you might not see as directly related to everything you want to do, or your product or your benefits, but it might be something that's related to a wider subject that does have relevancy. So for example, something like a client of ours, GPS, global processing services, they launched, or were very instrumental in launching, something called the Inclusion Foundation a few years ago, and that was headed up by one of their execs, and they invested in that, and they kept their brand completely separate from what that was, but they wanted to make a real difference, so that they were involved in events talking about issues that came out of this Inclusion Foundation, whether that was diversity, financial inclusion for certain communities. It was even talking, even picking up financial inclusion and digital inclusion for small businesses. So it's important to have that in mind. And then finally, thinking about what culture do you want to portray? And I think I touched on that a little bit a moment ago, when it's, there is a culture around there is a culture in fintech and in tech in general to follow that sort of Silicon Valley style. We're going to we want to make money. We're going to make you money. We're going to be the next unicorn. Even this morning, some of my team have been responding to Forbes's call for the next $1 billion business. So there's a huge temptation, and the media's set up to definitely go down that route. But I think it's balancing that with the genuine problem that's being solved, and that, going down the one route of we're the next best with the next best startup, that is certainly going to attract talent. But again, there's wanting to attract the right type of talent and the right type of investment that's going to help you maintain integrity in the business that you started. Of course, unless the plan is to sort of build something quick, get as much investment as possible and sell out. But I think my point is, it's about deciding what sort of culture that you want to have at what stage. So with that in mind, I think in summary, it's about sort of growth, attracting growth, credible leadership, and sustainability. And I wanted to just talk through a case study that demonstrates this and sort of takes us through the different stages. I don't know if this is a business that any of you have heard of or have come across. I would hope so, because I feel like we've done a good job of PRing them. But these are. I
was going to say, just so I can introduce. I was going to say, I know.
Thanks,
so you're obviously doing a good job. I saw them on TechCrunch, so you're doing great.
Great. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. But these are a business. The reason I just wanted to highlight these is Sion started working on PR when they had 1.2 million seed, and they had, I'm happy, I'll be honest, it's a closed shop. They were spending to give people a real view of this. So when they'd had 1.2 million seed, they began a PR program with us. They started on 3.5K a month doing PR. They're a Hungarian-born business with a HQ in London. They now have operations in Austin and Jakarta, and they've got big plans. So we started working with them about 10 months before they secured their 12 million Series A from Creandum, who are the guys behind Spotify and an early VC into Klarna as well. And they started with us at that early stage to go all out and to improve, to increase the value of the perceived value of their business within the VC community. I know firsthand that they were inundated after 6 months, and they had to actually, it was more of a beauty parade for them. So they had so many approaches for their Series A, and they went with Creandum for obvious reasons, given the credibility in the space and the success that business has had launching early stage businesses. Fast forward to from March 2021 to last week even, and we were able to announce proudly that they'd secured 94 million Series B from IVP over in Silicon Valley, who are typically a later stage business, but late last year launched an earlier stage fund, obviously wanting to get in with the tech, sort of with the buzz that's happening in and around fintech at the moment, and other areas of tech as well, health tech. So how were they able to do that in such a short space of time? And they've now become the most heavily invested tech startup out of Hungary. I know it's not a super well-known hub, but it's still got a lot of innovation coming out of there and a lot more investment going into the area. So they're now the most heavily invested tech startup from Hungary. Veritable celebrities in their own hometown. They are the most heavily invested fraud prevention startup ever. So it's no mean feat. What I would say is that they believed in the power. I've never worked with a business like this before who invested so heavily into their own digital footprint. So they invest into PR with us, and they also invest into their own production of digital content as well, which helps massively. So what we did for them, we started off very much by talking about the founder's story. You know, Benza and Tamas, they met at university. It was a lovely story. They met at Corvinus in Budapest. They went into crypto first of all. They realized there was a problem with fraud in the space, and then they did. Tamas, the CEO, is extremely technical himself, so they started to develop this product. They have a unique proposition, so we started to talk about what they do with social channels, how what they do is different. Then as we moved closer to the series A, they were in a fortunate position where they already had good customers, so we're able to start talking, as well as talking about the founder story, we moved to talk about case studies. They weren't as big a brands as they now work with, but we were able to talk in depth about where the tech had really helped and prove the proof points of the tech, and able to talk specifically about why their tech was different and how they built it. Post Series A, so for the last 12 months, we have really honed in on growing the team, bringing in other spokespeople from within the business, from the commercial and the tech team. We've elevated the spokespeople away from talking about business wins and business announcements. They're now talking about entrepreneurship to demonstrate their valuable leadership that any later stage, or, you know, if they want to get close to 100 million, we needed to build that in them because they're young guys. They're 27, both of them. So we needed to elevate them and get them into the top tier media. So we had Tamas talking about the metaverse and NFTs, and Benza talking about what he's learned on the entrepreneurial journey. Now we obviously secured the 94 million, which is great news. They went from spending 3,500 a month with us through to spending just less than 8, and they've now just doubled their retainer with us to handle their US PR to I'd say double, just close to 16. So I'm being honest about the fees because it's important, I think, to know what buys you what at what stage. And that's not to say you can't do a lot with early stage budgets. You can, but my recommendation for that would be that you do 1 or 2 things really well until you're up to a point where you can invest, but also to build PR into budgets at every point in a way that makes sense, obviously, for the commercial model. But these guys would say to anybody that PR increased the value of their business and increased the perceived value of their business in a way that's now going to enable them to grow, to get the funding in, to grow, and to grow internationally into LATAM and Asia as well. So that's, for me, is a case study, not just that I'm very proud of, but I think demonstrates what a commitment to PR, and also to say, look, we've only got 3 a month right now, but if we get to this point, it'll grow, and if we get to that point, it'll grow. And invest in the time and energy into your brand, the image of your brand. I'm just, if anybody, I just wondered if at this point anybody has got any comments or questions about that, or if there's anything that I'm sort of not.
I was going to say, I think in the Q&A, because we're going to do a Q&A session at the end, I think we're going to talk about different budgets and what you can do if you have a lower budget. But it might be a good time now just to sort of do the poll, which is, you know, have you thought about PR for your fintech, or have you budgeted for it? So let's put that poll out there and see what we get. So
it's 100% success rate.
It's important, all marketing and advertising. I mean, just while waiting for the poll, there we go, 3. So yeah, so everybody's saying yes at the moment. There you go. Everybody's saying yes. They have thought about PR and they are budgeting. So really interesting. All right, I'll be quiet. As I say, we do want at least 15 minutes for the Q&A. So I'll leave you to it. But yeah, we're doing a whole Q&A session next.
So I think then that we had, as I said, you know, there was due to be 2 of us on this, and I've sort of focused in on what I wanted to talk about, which was that how can PR, I think it's hard because a lot of businesses wait till they've got the funding in to spend on PR, which makes sense. But at the same time, for me, it's important to, it's even been a learning curve for me, even having an agency for nearly 15 years, that how influential PR can be. So the earliest you can start it and engage a specialist or an agency when the time is right, or even somebody in-house initially. But where PR has got to be aligned to what you need from an investment round. But of course, once you have secured that investment round, the next part of the webinar was to talk about how to then maximize that as a launch pad. So once you've secured the investment, it's obviously a big stamp of approval, and it's a vote of confidence in the business. So there's a whole campaign plan that comes after that. And what we agreed with Glenn and with Fintech Circle is we've actually already created a template or a plan or a step-by-step guide on how to create that campaign off the back of that, because it is I've already been speaking for 45 minutes almost about how PR can help you with investment, and then a whole campaign on how to then take advantage of that is almost a part 2. So we've put that into a handout, which we'll be emailing around tomorrow. But it is worth mentioning that at every stage, whether it's that you're opening a pre-seed round, or whether you've secured a seed, or you're doing a follow-up seed or a refinancing round, it is a moment to be proud of and to use as a launch pad, and almost like a net. Right now, this is the next stage. Now we need to up our game with comms. Now we're focusing on one spokesperson. Now we need to focus in on 2-3 spokespeople and bring in the expertise. Now we've talked about possible use cases. Now we need to talk about actual customers, and now we need to talk about the benefits of that, tangible data and benefits that have shown from our product. So once you do get that investment, that funding, yes, you need to think about, great, we've secured this funding, but direct feedback from the media to me and our team, we've got 30 people that are speaking to the press on a day-to-day basis, is that over the last 12 months, especially, that self-serving, we've raised this much money and it's all about us and we're great and we're going to be a unicorn. That's wearing a bit thin. So it's what else can you bring at each stage of investment, because there'll always be, everybody who raises funding wants to be in TechCrunch. Everybody wants to be in Sifted in fintech, and with good reason. But I think all of the media are now discerning when it comes to publishing a story and making sure that it's got that extra piece of content that makes it relevant. So I would also say that we're very, very lucky in the UK and Europe. We do the PR in the UK and Europe and also in North America, and it's a completely different landscape. Over here, we've got a whole fintech community, fintech press, startup press, tech press that support the innovation in this space and recognise it. And they're from emerging communities and communities like Fintech Circle through to sort of the top tier press that we would consider top tier business, such as Sifted and TechCrunch. They're here to support. So it's about recognising that and feeding that news with relevant content that you would want to read. But yeah, so just if you are close to closing a raise, or and you think that that's going to be a big PR moment for you, it is, and it's really useful. But what I would think about is a few quick tips on it are: engage in an agency or a specialist. Do it way in advance, because if you're not, you might, everybody listening might be ex-PR experts potentially, but just for those that aren't, it's not, here's a press release, let's send it out. So for Sion, an example would be, we knew about the B before it was signed. We knew who the angels were, we knew who the investors were 2 months in advance of that. And because of that, we were able to build our story, go through all the conversations. Do we want to say we're going to be a decagon? No. Do we want to say, actually, we're saying that we're raising this money, but we're raising this money to fight fraud, and why, and to put into the global context of why that's important. We then had a lead time where we were able to talk to 5 of the top tier media titles that we wanted to go to: Financial Times, CNBC, Business Insider, TechCrunch, Sifted, and give them, under embargo, some information. So we didn't disclose the size of the deal, or we didn't disclose who the investor was or the angels, but we were able to talk about the deal size and why, and to see if there was a way of getting into their agenda. From doing that 6 weeks out, we were able to secure a headline in CNBC, a lot of the time, TechCrunch sifted want exclusives, but because we built the momentum in the story, we were able to get into those titles without an exclusive. So that time, I don't know if everybody realizes that an agency would need that time to secure the exclusives. Then with the top or the tech and trade press, you then still need a week or two to go to them under embargo to get a decent space. If you go out on the day with a press release and you don't go before 7 a.m., you're going to end up with a bit of a news story somewhere later in the day. Whereas if you give the media and your agencies the time and respect to build the story, you might get a headline, you might be on the homepage because they've had time to build it into their schedule. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that, you know, PR isn't just transactional. Here's news, please run it. It is building that story, sending out your media kit a week in advance, things like that. So there's that element, the planning. And again, depending on stage, that could either be done in-house using our guidance that we're about to share tomorrow, or it could be done with a specialist, or you could engage an agency. But there's things that you will need to consider, and it can be a shock sometimes, and businesses aren't always keen to talk about it, and it sounds like it's stating the obvious. But if you're going to use a funding round as a platform for PR, then you need to be able to, or willing at least, to disclose the size of the deal, the valuation, the pre and post money valuation, your strategic intent as a business, and talk about the mission and how you're then going to measure that. If you can get in, you know, even if it's at seed stage, that we're going to employ 20 people, or we're going to go into this new market, you know, any specifics you can give, any first or unique things that you can build into that. So is there anything that you believe or could put hand on heart to the best of your knowledge is something that only you do? And then of course, importantly, what the money will be raised for. And this is the same at any level. So this is the same from seed to Series C to DD. You know, these are the things that need to go into a funding announcement. And then of course, at every point, if you're going through the funding rounds and you're a business that's not self-funded, but you've taken the decision to go through the funding rounds, you need to think about, have one eye on who's reading this from the next stage of investor. So we've gone with Sion from a local investor in Portfolion, who are CEE based, to Creandum, who are from Germany, who were their Series A. And we've always had one eye on the fact that their big round, their Series B, would come from a Silicon Valley based investor. So we had to track that through the news. So we had to show that they were going into the US. We had to show their product-led growth. We had to start talking about big customers like So Rare and Revolut. So it is just thinking that this is a platform to your next stage of funding. But in short, you know, the final point on that, which I have already made, but I'll just make again, is that you can engage a PR agency on various ways. So our business is structured that we are startups, started, scale-ups, and we also have an area of business called Consult, which is purely for businesses that want expertise and want to know how to do things, but either they're not ready yet to engage a PR agency, but they want some guidance and advice. So I would say more than ever, and I know you say, of course, I'm going to do my own PR, but I would say more than ever, fintech in fintech, PR has sort of come back around as one of the most important things. There was talk, you know, 5 years ago that digital marketing had killed off PR, and actually in reality, because of the nature of fintech and tech, it's come full circle, and we're now getting asked for content for digital. We have the relationships with the CEOs. We care about the funding rounds. We care what to communicate. So I would recommend exploring your PR options, and I would also, in fintech specifically, look for the experts, because there's us and there are others, really good agencies in fintech that understand the terminology and also the landscape. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. Think about PR as soon as you can. I know it's been sort of a long-winded, a lot of talking, but we will be sharing handouts, and I hope that there's been some knowledge shared there that's added value. It's a PR person presenting about PR is potentially a webinar nightmare, but hopefully I've shared some useful hints and tips and given some food for thought.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberley. I think it has been very, very useful. We did some social media previously, get some questions in, and if anybody wants to, just feel free to ask a question. Just to your right there where it says Q&A, you can sort of write any questions you want to have answered. But we've got some prepped anyway. So Kimberley, so what would you say? What are the advantages of sort of outsourcing to a PR agency versus having it in-house and having your own sort of PR department, as it were? Why would we outsource, as an example?
Well, I do think I'm here to sort of give an honest answer, not the advanced answer that best suits my business, I suppose. But what I would say is there's horses for courses, and it does depend very much on that individual. So I would always argue that a PR agency, the value of an agency versus someone in-house is that view of the market, is that journalist relationships. I mean, we're talking to journalists on a daily basis about different businesses from sort of different elements of the fintech space. So it's very, very hard for one individual to achieve that, even if they're fantastic, even if they're the best of what they do. It is hard to get that that knowledge and that day-to-day, because people move as well. Journalists move around a lot. It's also the community of fintech, and I'm sure you'll agree, Glenn, that it really is, it's who there's lots of events. It's, I'm speaking at this event, or we've got a client who's presenting there. Actually, we need someone to talk about embedded finance on that panel. Let's do that. So there is that part of being part of the fintech community, and if an agency is embedded in that, it adds value. Counter to that, obviously, is budgets, and an agency will be more expensive. So if budgets are a concern early on, my advice, and you are going to go in-house, my advice would be, it's really, really about that individual. So it could be that you invest in bringing someone in-house that's previously agency or has done it before.
Let's pick up on that cost one, because Ellie's just asked, Ellie Cook. He sort of says $3,000 per month can be quite a big cost for an early stage business. However, I agree, it's important when raising, let's say, seed. Do you ever do structured relationships where you agree fees but take payment upon round completion?
Actually, as part of the starter division that we launched just last year, just coming up for 2 years old actually now, but really got underway last year, was that we're flexible on payment terms. I mean, our objective as an agency that loves fintech, makes a living from fintech, employs people from fintech, is that we do genuinely support early stage businesses. There's nothing more satisfying than going through that. The only element for us, I guess, is just managing that risk, as with any business. But we're certainly open to it.
Well, I mean, I think that feeds into a second question, which really is, if you are starting out and you have a little budget, what do you reckon, what would you consider to be the minimum you need to sort of engage and start doing some sort of PR campaign? What are we talking?
Well, you could start with just a bit of elbow grease if you're a founder that's that way inclined, and a lot of founders do start that way. And I think that we are in an industry and a media, a sector of the media that do still want to hear from founders. They do still want to hear your story. I'm actually myself a founding member of a very, very early stage startup that you're about to hear a little bit more of. And that we just posting on the founder's LinkedIn, he's starting to expose a little bit more, and that's been picked up completely organically by the media, just because he started to talk a little bit about his story. So you could start with nothing. That's the great thing about PR and telling a good story. I mean, with an agency, you're paying that agency to create stories that are going to get picked up by the press for free. So I'm talking about organic PR. So you can start with a bit of elbow grease, but I'm being genuine when I say to bring in a specialist agency, you are looking really around that 3.5.
So 3.5.
And I say that because we spent many years with our fees from 1,500 up to 15K a month, and we realized that is the price point where you can give them the real value and it be a mutually happy relationship, because we have worked for less. And the expectations of founders are always very, very high, even if that's early stage. And if you just can't dedicate the hours commercially to that, it's not going to end up a happy relationship. So for us, that's a genuine tipping point.
Okay, so that's a sort of where you come in at, really. Yeah. You get the biggest bang for the buck and start off. So another question. I mean, what on that note then, so for little people and so what would be your, on that organic sort of PR, what would be your top 3 tips to anybody who was going to put in some elbow grease? What would you say? What were the top 3 things they should do, just briefly?
First of all, really read the news and have the diligence to look at look at where perhaps your competitors are, or the topics that you think you can most influence are being talked about, and actually look at the journalists that are writing about those. So don't assume, you know, journalists are people, they have to make a living, they have to write, they're going to prioritize content that's going to get them readers and get their editors to sign stuff off and get them interested. So when it comes to organic PR, firstly, I would look at what's being spoken about and who is writing about it, obviously, and then you need to, you know, link in with them. We have databases that we spend thousands of pounds a year on. If you're not at that point, LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for journalists. They tweet a lot, you know, and you can contact them via Twitter, but for trade journalists, I would say LinkedIn is a great way. So look at who's writing what, connect personally, and think about your story, what's unique, what's different, and really think about what you're prepared to share and be transparent.
Okay. So number one, see what people are talking about and find those journalists.
Who is writing about it,
yeah. Number two, define that sort of story. That's what you sort of maybe tie that story.
Yeah, think about the why. Don't think this is what we're doing. Do a Simon Sinek and why that matters and who it matters to, and then get on LinkedIn and connect directly with the journalists. Because if you're connected, or you're, you know, and don't follow, go to the dots and don't just follow the journalists, connect with the journalists, because then obviously they'll see news that you start pushing out, and LinkedIn is so valuable. So yeah, look who's writing what. The ones that you admire or your competitors are in, link in directly to those journalists via LinkedIn, connect with them, don't follow them, and then start posting stuff that talks about your business, but not just, aren't we great? Yeah. We're great because. And that I
love that. We're great because here's the impact. Here's the, and I think I'm sure you agree. It's got to be newsworthy. You're looking for that. What's the thing that would make a reader take notice, because that's what journalists are looking for, isn't it? Readership. Yeah. Is that correct?
Exactly. 100%. Sign off from their editors, something their editors are going to approve, and something that's going to get them readers.
Okay, very good. I think you've just gone on mute, Kimberley. But have you got any more questions coming in? I'll tell you what, just two more, and then we'll wrap it up. So I'm not quite sure what the time is, but it's been great value. So thank you. So how would you actually measure the results? How do you measure?
Well, there's lots of ways to measure PR. You know, there's lots of tried and tested formulas. There's the old sort of equivalent advertising spend. There's the Barcelona principles, which require you to, you know, work with the client to look at their impact on their own marketing channels, where they can measure, and include things like reach and engagement. But what we found for clients is that each sort of client has a different need and requirement at different stages. So we build our KPIs together. We had everything from, please don't attract any new business because we're talking to everybody that we want to sell to. We just want credibility to help close those deals, right through to, we want PR to drive top of the funnel leads, inbound leads, through to, we want to attract talent, we want to attract investment. So there's never just one measurable output for PR. So if anybody is looking to measure PR just by sales, I would say that's not the way to do it. It's working with your PR agency to build a set of criteria that of course include ROI and sales, but consider other factors as well. The best thing for us is when I'll keep Sion as the example, because they're a good one, when they say, gosh, you know, we would never have got from Series A at 12 million to 94 million in 12 months if we hadn't done PR. That for me is real, tangible, serious difference we've made.
Exactly. Hey, good news. I hear that it is actually still broadcasting and it is recording. So we're going to make this available after. Good. But I tell you what, it's probably a good time to sort of bring it to a close. So I will say, Kimberley, thank you so much. We took a bit of organization to make it happen, but you're here and it's been brilliant. So we greatly appreciate that. And thank you for adding so much value. And pass on our best to Angela and her mum as well. So, yeah. So we've got, I know one of your brochures is in the handouts to the right. So if anybody wants to download a brochure, and as you say, so just again, we'll email out, you can say what it is.
Yeah, we're going to email out a bit more detail on the second part of the webinar, which was when, you know, if you want to promote an investment.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. So we'll send that out in an email. So thank you for everybody for viewing. So thank you, Kimberley. Thank you, Ange. And thank you, our audience. I hope that added massive value. I like the 3 tips, by the way, as well. So without further ado, we'll say goodbye, and hopefully we'll see you. We'll make the video available The recording will be available on Fintech Circle, because remember, it's only for members. And we hope to see you at a member event very soon. All right, take care. Bye.